Kody, did it ever feel for you like a line was crossed?
Well, I didn't know what was going on. I was lost in this. And Meri and I were struggling enough that it was very hard to communicate.
Meri Brown just confirmed what Sister Wives fans have suspected for almost 10 years, and it's worse than anyone imagined because Robyn Brown didn't just know about the catfishing scandal, she was allegedly feeding information directly to the catfish while pretending to be Meri's friend. And when you see the timeline of when this all happened, you're going to lose your mind. Subscribe now because this conspiracy goes deeper than you ever thought possible.
Robyn Brown was involved in the great catfishing of Meri.
Before we get into Meri's shocking revelations about Robyn's betrayal, I need to tell you about the one piece of evidence that makes this entire conspiracy theory almost impossible to deny. And it involves Robyn's friend Kendra, who vouched for the catfish and created an information pipeline that destroyed Meri's life. But I'm going to save that bombshell for later because first you need to understand exactly how calculated this entire setup actually was. Let's go back to 2015 when the Sister Wives world was rocked by a scandal that nobody saw coming. And Meri Brown found herself at the center of what would become one of the most humiliating experiences ever captured on reality television. In March of 2015, Meri connected with someone on Twitter who went by the name Sam Cooper, and this person presented themselves as a successful international business tycoon in his early 40s, who seemed almost too good to be true, which of course should have been the first red flag, but Meri was vulnerable and lonely and desperate for someone to see her as valuable. The person behind the Sam Cooper persona only ever showed half of their face in photos, which is classic catfish behavior that anyone who's ever watched an episode of Catfish with Nev and Max would recognize immediately. But Meri was so starved for attention and affection after years of being emotionally neglected by Kody that she didn't question it the way she probably should have. For 6 entire months, from March through August of 2015, Meri poured her heart out to this person she believed was Sam, sending text messages and phone calls and even intimate photos that would later be leaked and used to humiliate her publicly. The relationship escalated quickly from casual Twitter flirting to phone conversations where Meri would gush about her feelings and complain about Kody and talk about her hopes for a future with Sam. And she left approximately 200 voicemails where you can hear her voice completely transformed from the guarded woman we see on Sister Wives into someone who sounds young and hopeful and completely in love with someone she'd never actually met in person. She sent photos that included her posing seductively with a banana to simulate a sexual act, and another photo of her legs in a bathtub with Sam's name written on her skin. And these weren't just innocent, flirty pictures, but rather images that showed just how deeply Meri had fallen for this person. But here's where the story takes a dark turn that nobody talks about enough, because Meri did actually meet someone in person during this time period, and that person was Lindsay, who claimed to be Sam's assistant. Meri met Lindsay multiple times, including a trip to Disneyland, where Lindsay kept promising that Sam would show up, but he never did. And during one of these meetings, Lindsay allegedly threatened Meri and told her that she would ruin Meri's life and destroy her family if Meri didn't continue the relationship, which is straight up blackmail and manipulation tactics that go way beyond typical catfishing. In August of 2015, the truth finally came crashing down when Meri discovered that Sam Cooper didn't exist at all, and the person who had been manipulating her for 6 months was actually a woman named Jackie Overton, who was a known online scammer from Oklahoma with a history of creating fake identities to target vulnerable people and extract whatever she could from them, whether that was money or photos or emotional satisfaction from controlling someone's life. Jackie Overton was both Sam Cooper and Lindsay, playing multiple characters in an elaborate scheme that consumed 6 months of Meri's life and left her emotionally devastated and publicly humiliated. But wait, because it gets so much worse than just a random internet predator targeting a lonely reality TV star. And this is where Meri's recent revelations start to paint a picture that looks less like random victimization and more like a calculated inside job designed specifically to destroy Meri's position in the Brown family hierarchy. Now, I'm going to tell you about the conversation Meri had with Robyn that changed everything. But first, you absolutely need to understand the timeline of when this catfishing happened, because when you see how perfectly convenient the timing was, you're going to start asking the same questions that thousands of Sister Wives fans have been asking for years.
Robyn was, at bare minimum, deeply entangled in Meri's catfishing debacle.
Here's what makes this entire situation so suspicious that even people who initially believed it was just a random catfishing incident are now questioning whether there was something more sinister happening behind the scenes. Meri legally divorced Kody Brown in September of 2014. And this wasn't because their marriage was ending, but rather because Kody wanted to legally marry his fourth wife, Robyn, so that he could adopt her 3 children from her previous marriage. And Meri agreed to this arrangement because she believed they would still be spiritually married and that her position as first wife still meant something in the family structure. Kody and Robyn legally married on December 11th, 2014, which was just 3 months after Meri's legal divorce from Kody was finalized. And then, exactly 3 months later, in March of 2015, Meri suddenly connects with Sam Cooper on Twitter and begins this whirlwind online romance that would consume the next 6 months of her life. Do you see how perfectly timed this is? Meri gives up her legal marriage to Kody so that Robyn can become the legal wife. And then almost immediately afterward, Meri gets catfished in a scandal that would give Kody the perfect excuse to emotionally check out of their relationship completely. The catfishing scandal allowed Kody to position Meri as the one who betrayed the family, as the one who had an affair, even though it was an emotional affair with someone who didn't actually exist. And this gave him moral justification to treat Meri terribly for the next 8 years until she finally left in 2023. Before the catfishing, Meri still had some standing in the family as Kody's first wife and the woman who had built this family with him from the very beginning. But after the catfishing, she was completely neutralized and pushed to the absolute bottom of Kody's wife hierarchy, with Robyn firmly established at the very top.
What was it that you were hearing from this person?
Didn't Meri
that was
get
so
like the whole
appealing to
catfish
you?
situation
At the very
in
beginning,
2014, something
this
like that,
person
2015?
was fun,
Anyway, ciao.
funny.
We
just
revisited
good
that catfish.
conversation. I don't know. At first,
We
it was
thought it
kinda
was a
cool
dude,
to
turns
just
out
kind
it
of
was a
have
woman.
That kind
She
of
was looking to
companionship,
expose the whole
I guess.
family.
Fans have been pointing out for years that this timing is just too perfect to be a coincidence. Because what are the odds that a known internet scammer would just randomly target Meri Brown specifically at the exact moment when she was most vulnerable after giving up her legal marriage, and during the exact time period when her removal from the top of the family structure would most benefit Robyn Brown, who had just become the legal wife? Now, here's where Meri's recent revelations blow this entire situation wide open and confirm what fans have suspected for almost a decade. Because Meri just admitted that she confided in Robyn about the situation with Sam during the time when it was happening. Meri trusted Robyn enough to share private conversations and intimate details about what was going on with this person she believed she was in a relationship with. And she thought Robyn was her friend and confidant who would keep these conversations private and help her navigate this confusing emotional situation. But according to Meri, those private conversations she had with Robyn somehow ended up being relayed to both the catfish Jackie Overton and to Kody, which means that information Meri shared with Robyn in confidence was being leaked to the very person who was manipulating her and to her husband, who would later use this scandal to justify emotionally abandoning her. Meri specifically said this revelation led to a huge lack of trust for her, and when you think about what that means, it's absolutely devastating because the person she thought was her friend was allegedly feeding information to her abuser and her husband simultaneously. Think about how sinister this actually is if the conspiracy theory is true, because it means Robyn was positioned as Meri's trusted friend and confidant while secretly working against her by sharing information that would help the catfish manipulate Meri more effectively, and that would help Kody build his case against Meri. Robyn would have known exactly what Meri was feeling, exactly what she was saying to Sam, exactly how deep this emotional connection had become, and she could have used all of that information to ensure that when the scandal finally broke, Kody would be absolutely disgusted with Meri and would have no sympathy for how she'd been manipulated. But the most shocking part of this conspiracy theory isn't even about Robyn directly. It's about Robyn's friend, who allegedly played the most crucial role in making sure Meri fell for this scam in the first place.
Kody, did it ever feel for you like a line was crossed?
Well, I didn't know what was going on. I was lost in this. And Meri and I were struggling enough that it was very hard to communicate. Where I was in the end was I thought that she was saying, I need a break from this marriage.
And when you hear what this friend did and how connected she was to both Robyn and to the catfish, you're going to understand why so many people believe this was an inside job. Her name is Kendra Pollard-Para, and she's the missing piece that connects Robyn Brown directly to Jackie Overton and the catfishing scheme in a way that makes the entire conspiracy theory almost impossible to dismiss as just paranoid speculation. Kendra was Robyn's close friend who appeared briefly on Sister Wives back in 2014 as some kind of fashion consultant during a shopping trip to San Francisco, and Robyn publicly acknowledged on Twitter that Kendra was her friend and business partner who was involved with their online boutique called Sister Wives Closet. But here's where Kendra's role becomes absolutely crucial to understanding how the catfishing scheme worked. Because according to multiple reports, Meri only began seriously interacting with Sam Cooper after Kendra Pollard-Para vouched for his authenticity and claimed that she had video chatted with Sam and could confirm that he was a real person. Think about how important that endorsement would have been for Meri, who was probably already suspicious about this person, who never showed their full face and never wanted to meet in person. Because having Robyn's close friend Kendra vouch for Sam's legitimacy would have completely eliminated Meri's doubts and made her feel safe to continue pursuing this relationship. Kendra didn't just vouch for Sam once and then disappear. She allegedly created what fans are calling an information pipeline, where she would extract information from Meri about her feelings and her relationship with Sam, and then that information would flow back to Robyn, who could use it however she wanted, whether that meant feeding it to Jackie Overton to make the catfishing more effective or feeding it to Kody to make him more disgusted with Meri's behavior. Kendra even ran a Facebook group that was supposedly for Sister Wives fans, where Sam Cooper was invited to answer questions, and where Kendra continued to insist that Sam was a real man who had genuinely fallen in love with Meri. After the scandal broke and Meri discovered she'd been catfished, the Brown family cut all ties with Kendra Pollard-Para, which is extremely telling, because why would they completely sever their relationship with Robyn's close friend unless they suspected she had played some role in what happened to Meri? For years, Kendra had been one of the most vocal defenders of the Brown family on social media, particularly defending Robyn against any criticism, but suddenly, after the catfishing scandal became public, the family wanted nothing to do with her anymore. But here's what makes Kendra's involvement even more suspicious, because Kendra later teamed up with Jackie Overton herself, and the two of them went on what can only be described as a Facebook rampage where they continued to insist that Sam Cooper was real and that Meri had genuinely been in love with a man who existed. Why would Kendra align herself with the catfish after the scandal broke unless she had been working with Jackie all along and they were both part of the same scheme to destroy Meri's credibility and position in the family? Now I'm going to explain exactly how Robyn allegedly used all of this information to manipulate Kody's feelings about Meri and turn his indifference into pure disgust. But first, I need you to understand what Meri's position in the family was before the catfishing and what it became afterward, because the transformation is absolutely devastating. Before the catfishing scandal, Kody's relationship with Meri was already strained and distant, but it wasn't completely dead, and there was still some level of respect for Meri as the first wife who had been with Kody since the very beginning and who had helped him build this entire family. Kody was indifferent to Meri at that point, not particularly interested in her romantically or emotionally, but not actively hostile toward her either. And there was always the possibility that they could rebuild their relationship if they both put in the effort. But after the catfishing scandal broke and all of those voicemails and photos were leaked publicly, Kody's indifference transformed into what can only be described as pure disgust and contempt for Meri that he never tried to hide from anyone. He told her on camera that he never loved her, that he was never attracted to her, that their marriage had been on the rocks the entire time, which was a complete rewriting of their history together. And he held the catfishing scandal over her head for years as justification for why he couldn't work on their relationship or show her any affection or even basic kindness. The theory is that Robyn took the information Meri had confided in her and framed every single detail in the absolute worst possible light when sharing it with Kody, making sure that Kody understood Meri hadn't just been talking to someone online, but had been actively planning to leave the family and had been bad-mouthing him to Sam and had been sending sexually explicit photos and proclaiming her love for another man. Robyn could have presented this information in a way that made Meri look like the biggest betrayer in the world, rather than a vulnerable woman who had been manipulated by an expert scammer. And that framing would have given Kody permission to completely check out of his marriage to Meri with no guilt whatsoever. This served Robyn's interests perfectly because, with Meri neutralized and pushed to the bottom of the wife hierarchy, Robyn's position at the top became absolutely unshakable and unchallenged. Meri couldn't complain about Robyn's favoritism anymore because she'd had an affair, even though it was with someone who didn't exist, and Kody now had moral justification to spend all of his time and attention and resources on Robyn and her children while completely neglecting Meri. The catfishing scandal gave Robyn everything she wanted, which was undisputed status as Kody's #1 wife, and the removal of any competition from Meri, who had always held the title of first wife even after giving up her legal marriage. Here's what makes this conspiracy theory move from interesting speculation to something that feels almost undeniable when you look at all the evidence together, because everything about this situation points to coordination rather than random chance. Jackie Overton didn't just randomly stumble across Meri Brown's Twitter account and decide to catfish her for fun. She was a known scammer who created elaborate schemes to target specific vulnerable people. And she somehow knew exactly when Meri would be most vulnerable, which was right after she'd given up her legal marriage to Kody. Jackie knew intimate details about the Brown family dynamics that wouldn't be public knowledge to a random fan watching the show. And she used those details to manipulate Meri by telling her exactly what she wanted to hear about how terrible Kody was to her and how she deserved so much better. The catfish had inside information about Meri's emotional state and her feelings about the divorce and her insecurities about her position in the family. And where would that information have come from if not from someone who was close to the family and who Meri trusted with her private thoughts and feelings? Kendra vouching for Sam's authenticity removed Meri's last defenses against being scammed, because Meri would have known that Kendra was Robyn's close friend and business partner. And if Kendra said she'd video chatted with Sam and he was real, then Meri had no reason not to trust that verification. It's the perfect setup, where Kendra serves as the bridge between Robyn and Jackie, providing legitimacy to the catfish scheme and ensuring that Meri would fall deep enough into the relationship that the eventual revelation and public humiliation would be absolutely devastating. And then there's the timeline that we've already discussed, which is just too perfectly convenient to ignore, because the catfishing happened at exactly the right moment to neutralize Meri's position in the family, right after she'd made the sacrifice of giving up her legal marriage. If this had happened a year earlier or a year later, the impact would have been different. But it happened at the exact moment when it would do the maximum damage to Meri's standing in the family and provide the maximum benefit to Robyn's position as the new legal wife. When you add up all of these factors together, the perfectly timed scandal right after Meri's divorce, Kendra vouching for Sam's authenticity, despite being Robyn's close friend, the inside information that Jackie had about family dynamics, Meri's revelations that Robyn leaked their private conversations to both the catfish and to Kody, and the way the scandal perfectly served Robyn's interests by removing Meri as competition, it starts to look less like a random catfishing incident and more like a calculated attack designed specifically to destroy Meri's position in the family. Now, here's why this conspiracy theory is suddenly being discussed again almost 10 years later, because Meri's recent revelations about Robyn betraying her trust have given fans the final piece of confirmation they needed to believe this wasn't just paranoid speculation, but rather something that actually happened exactly the way the conspiracy theory suggests. For years, Meri stayed silent about the details of what happened during the catfishing scandal, and she took an enormous amount of public humiliation and allowed herself to be portrayed as the villain who had an affair and betrayed her family, even though she was the victim of an elaborate scam. She could have spoken out earlier about Robyn's alleged involvement, or about Kendra vouching for Sam, or about any of the suspicious circumstances surrounding the whole situation, but she didn't, because she was still trying to maintain some semblance of family unity, and she probably still hoped that she and Kody could eventually work things out. But now in 2024 and 2025, Meri is finally free from Kody and from the Brown family structure that kept her silent for so long, and she started opening up about things that she would never have talked about while she was still desperately trying to hold on to her marriage. She confirmed that she felt betrayed by Robyn because their private conversations were leaked to the catfish and to Kody, which is the smoking gun that connects Robyn directly to the scheme in a way that goes beyond just circumstantial evidence and speculation. Meri revealed this information knowing exactly what fans would do with it, and knowing that it would fuel the conspiracy theories that have been circulating for years. And the fact that she's willing to speak about it now suggests that she believes the conspiracy theory is true, and she wants people to know that she wasn't just a gullible woman who got catfished by a random internet predator, but rather a woman who was systematically targeted and betrayed by people she thought were her friends and family. The timing of Meri's revelations also makes sense because Robyn and Kody are now isolated with only each other left after all three of Kody's other wives have walked away, and Meri has nothing left to lose by telling the truth about what really happened during those 6 months in 2015. She's no longer trying to protect Robyn or maintain family harmony or give Kody reasons to work on their relationship, because all of those bridges have been burned and Meri is finally free to tell her story without worrying about the consequences. Think about what this conspiracy theory means if it's true, because it means that Meri was betrayed not just by an internet scammer, but by her own family members who were supposed to love and protect her. It means that while she was being manipulated and controlled by Jackie Overton, Robyn was allegedly feeding information that made the manipulation more effective and more devastating, and Kendra was vouching for the authenticity of someone she knew didn't exist just to make sure Meri fell deep enough into the scam that it would destroy her credibility and her position in the family. For 8 years after the catfishing scandal, Meri endured Kody's contempt and disgust while constantly being told that the breakdown of their marriage was her fault because of her affair with someone who wasn't even real. She tried desperately to rebuild Kody's trust and repair their relationship, going to therapy and making efforts to connect with him and basically begging him to see her as valuable again. But Kody held the catfishing over her head as justification for why he couldn't move forward with her. Kody told her in 2011, before the catfishing even happened, that she had been really horrible to him for 20 years, and that she would have to wait at least that long for him to fix their relationship, which shows that he was already planning to punish her for 2 decades before she ever even met Sam Cooper online. The catfishing just gave him the perfect excuse to make good on that threat and to treat Meri terribly while positioning himself as the victim who had been betrayed rather than the husband who had emotionally abandoned his wife and created the vulnerability that made her susceptible to being scammed in the first place. And through all of this, Meri stayed in the marriage and kept trying and kept hoping that eventually Kody would forgive her and they could rebuild what they'd had, not knowing that the whole situation had allegedly been orchestrated by Robyn to ensure that Meri would never regain her position in the family. Meri gave up 12 more years of her life after the catfishing, trying to fix a marriage that Kody had already decided was over. And if the conspiracy theory is true, then she was fighting a battle she could never win because the deck had been stacked against her from the very beginning. When you step back and look at who benefited from the catfishing scandal, there's really only one person whose life dramatically improved as a direct result of what happened to Meri, and that person is Robyn Brown. Before the scandal, Robyn was facing potential resentment and resistance from the other wives, particularly from Meri, who had given up her legal marriage so that Robyn could marry Kody. And there was always the possibility that Meri could use her status as first wife to create problems for Robyn, or to compete for Kody's attention and affection. After the scandal, all of that competition was eliminated because Meri was completely disgraced and pushed to the bottom of the hierarchy with no way to climb back up. And Robyn's position as Kody's favorite and the legal wife became absolutely unassailable. Kody could spend all of his time with Robyn and her children without anyone being able to complain because, after all, Meri had betrayed the family with her emotional affair. So clearly she didn't deserve Kody's time and attention and resources. The catfishing scandal also served to divide the wives and prevent them from ever forming a united front against Robyn's obvious favoritism. Because how could Meri complain about Robyn getting special treatment when Meri herself had supposedly done something so much worse by developing feelings for another man? Christine and Janelle couldn't defend Meri without looking like they were condoning infidelity. So the scandal effectively isolated Meri from any potential allies within the family and made sure she would bear the full weight of Kody's disgust and contempt alone. If you wanted to design a situation that would perfectly serve Robyn's interests and destroy Meri's position in the family, you literally could not come up with anything better than what actually happened with the catfishing scandal. It was too perfect, too convenient, too precisely timed, and too effective at achieving exactly the outcome that Robyn would have wanted, which is why so many fans have suspected for years that this wasn't just a random occurrence, but rather something that was orchestrated specifically to benefit Robyn at Meri's expense. Fast forward to today and look at where everyone ended up, because the aftermath of the catfishing scandal literally shaped the next decade of the Brown family's history and directly contributed to the complete collapse of Kody's plural marriage. Meri finally left in 2023 after nearly 3 decades of marriage, including 8 years of trying to recover from the catfishing scandal. And she's now living her best life in Utah, running her bed and breakfast, and dating someone new, and finally free from Kody's contempt and Robyn's manipulation. Christine left in 2021 and is now happily remarried to David Woolley and glowing with the kind of happiness she never had with Kody. And Janelle left in 2022 and is building her dream life on 156 acres in North Carolina, surrounded by her children, who chose to live near her rather than near their father. All three of Kody's ex-wives are thriving and healing and building new lives for themselves, while Kody sits in his mansion with Robyn, completely isolated from the majority of his 18 children who refuse to have relationships with him. Robyn got exactly what the conspiracy theory suggests she wanted, which is complete and total access to Kody without any competition from other wives. But instead of that being the happy ending she supposedly orchestrated the catfishing scandal to achieve, it's actually a nightmare where Kody is miserable and angry and estranged from most of his kids and completely dependent on Robyn, who now has to deal with his bitterness and rage all by herself. The catfishing scandal might have helped Robyn win the battle for Kody's attention and affection, but she ultimately lost the war because the family completely fell apart, and she's left with a man who has become increasingly angry and isolated and impossible to live with. Meri's recent revelations about feeling betrayed by Robyn have reignited all of the conspiracy theories that have been circulating for years, and fans are more convinced than ever that the catfishing wasn't just a random internet predator targeting a lonely woman, but rather a calculated inside job designed to destroy Meri's position in the family and secure Robyn's place at the top of Kody's wife hierarchy. Whether or not the conspiracy theory is completely accurate in every detail, what's undeniable is that Robyn allegedly betrayed Meri's trust by leaking their private conversations, and that betrayal combined with the suspicious timing and the involvement of Robyn's friend Kendra makes it almost impossible not to see this as something more sinister than just unfortunate circumstances. Meri spent 8 years being punished for falling victim to an elaborate scam, and if the conspiracy theory is true, then she was punished for being betrayed by her own family members who used her vulnerability against her to serve their own interests. That's not just tragic, it's evil. And it explains why Meri is finally speaking out now that she's free from the family structure that kept her silent for so long. The catfish conspiracy isn't just about whether Robyn knew what was happening or whether Kendra vouched for Sam or whether the timing was suspicious. It's about the fundamental question of whether Meri was betrayed by the people she trusted most in the world and whether her entire life was derailed by a scheme designed specifically to benefit someone else at her expense. And based on everything we now know, including Meri's own confirmation that Robyn leaked their private conversations, the answer to that question is looking more and more like yes, this was exactly the inside job that fans have suspected all along.